Hello there guys, RMP792 here. Right, continuing on my Warhammer 40k thing. Last time I talked about the Tau, who are one of the youngest races in the universe. This time I think I'm going to talk about arguably the oldest. I'm going to talk about the Necrons. And the Necrons are very interesting people, but to really talk about the Necrons I have to actually go a little bit further back and talk about the old ones. And the old ones are widely regarded to be the first race to achieve sentience in the Warhammer 40k universe. And when the old ones were around, the warp was very calm. You know, they could use it very happily without worrying about it, because the old ones were, for the most part, a peaceful people. And they were also incredibly powerful psychers, so their influence on the warp was significant, and the warp was very calm. That started to change when the old ones encountered a species that I'm still not 100% sure what the pronunciation is, so I'm just going to go with how I've always pronounced it, and if that's wrong, feel free to tell me I'm a moron. Which is the Necrotar, or the Necroteer, possibly. I'm not sure. But the Necrotar were kind of the exact opposite of the old ones. They had no particular psychic abilities, and whereas the old ones would happily live for thousands of years, most Necrotar died extremely young because their sun was basically putting out massive amounts of radiation, and that meant they all basically died of cancers, of radiation poisoning, and all that unpleasant stuff at a very young age. And they looked at the old ones, and they were insanely jealous of them. And the Necrotar had been fighting civil wars with each other for literally centuries, probably even millennia, and some of their leaders saw the arrival of the old ones as a chance to unify their people against a common enemy. And that's exactly what they did. And the Necrotar had very, very powerful weapons, but they were going to lose the war. That was guaranteed, for the simple reason that the old ones had FTL travel, and the Necrotar, if they did, it was extremely limited. Which meant, while they could theoretically win one-on-one battles, they would get trounced because the enemy could call in reinforcements pretty much immediately, whereas they would take weeks or months to get there. So the Necrotar were going to lose the war, and lose it badly. Until they got an offer. And I'm going to have to talk about the Catan at this point. The Catan are a very odd race, because they're sort of energy beings, and they feed off the energy of stars. However, the Catan are also not a pleasant species, and they realised that while stars sustain them very effectively, stars don't taste particularly interesting. They're very bland. Souls, on the other hand, they taste really, really good. So the Catan basically came to the Necrotar and offered them what they desperately wanted. They offered them immortality. The Catan basically said that they would give them the power to defeat their enemy, they would unite their people completely, and they would grant them immortal bodies in which to live out all of time. And on a purely technical reading, they did exactly that. They transferred the souls of the Necrotar into new bodies, made of a living metal known as necrodermis. And when that happened, the Necrotar ceased to exist, and the Necrons were born. However, being made of living metal isn't all it's cracked up to be, because it dulled their minds, it dulled their emotions, and it bled away their souls to all intents and purposes. And it gave the Catan something to feed on, and they really liked that. Each Necron was built from the ground up to be a very combat capable unit, virtually indestructible, capable of rebuilding itself if it's destroyed, and with extremely powerful Gauss-based weaponry. Necrons are very, very difficult to stop, because even if you blow one apart, you give it long enough, it'll put itself right the hell back together again. And the classic argument is, well, why don't you put it in 5 separate boxes? Yeah, sure, you can do that. For a few of them. How the hell do you do it to an entire species? So, defeating Necrons permanently is extremely difficult. All you can really do is beat them back and know that they'll be back eventually. And the Necrons launched a full-scale war against the Old Ones. And the Old Ones knew they were going to lose. because now that they had the Catan backing them, now that they had their almost indestructible bodies, the old ones couldn't beat them. They pulled out two big things to actually let them, to all intents and purposes, win their war. They were the Orcs and they were the Eldar. I'll talk about the Orcs in detail in a future video. But the Eldar were basically uplifted by the old ones for use in their war. And the Eldar like to think of themselves as the chosen of the old ones, which is sort of true in a way, because they basically took a race with great psychic potential and then really kick-started their psychic abilities so that they could become powerful soldiers for them. And it worked. The Necrons were eventually beaten back, and they ended up in planets all over the galaxy encased in their tomb worlds, which is basically massive underground repositories that just have tens of thousands of Necrons in hibernation, just waiting. Because the Catan are patient, that they are powerful and they are patient. And sooner or later, those Necrons will rise, and they will destroy all life on the planets they touch, and the Catan will feed on those souls, which is not a pleasant way to go. But if the Eldar were based very much on the elves from the 40k tabletop, from the original Warhammer tabletop game, the Necrons are the undead. They are an army of the living dead who will not stop, will not be slowed, and will kill you eventually. And it doesn't matter how many bolter rounds you put into them, they're still coming for you. So the Necrons are a very, very terrifying enemy, but they're also to be pitied, because they went into it desperate for immortality, and they got it, and the price they paid was their freedom, their emotions, their will. The Catan didn't completely win, of course, because the Necron lords realised what was happening far, far too late, and took direct control of the Necron units themselves, and the Catan ended up sort of shattered and scattered, and again, the lore's kind of vague on what actually happened there. But there's pieces of the Catan all over the place. There's actually one on Mars, or I should rephrase. There is a thing on Mars called the Void Dragon of Mars, which is strongly suspected to be a fragment of one Catan. And we genuinely don't know for certain because, well, 40k lore is deliberately vague on some of these points. But one of the big Necron, one of the big Catan, was the Night Lord. And the Night Lord is the reason that everybody's scared of death. Because if you're trying to imagine the Night Lord, imagine the Grim Reaper. Now make him about 100 feet tall. Now you're getting the image of the Night Lord. He basically has put a psychic imprint of himself into the genetic memory of every species in the galaxy, with one exception, that being the Orcs. And again, I'll do a video on the Orcs in the future to really explain that. But the Night Lord, watching him march or float across a battlefield, scythe in hand, cutting down his foes, that's enough to make even Space Marines require a change of power armor. So, I say the Necrons basically aim to destroy all life. They were, as I said, they were eventually pushed back, and they went into a form of hibernation. That was many, many thousands of years ago. That was before humanity really evolved, to all intents and purposes. There were probably, there would have been life on Earth at this point, but it would have been at a fairly primitive stage. So the Necrons have been sleeping for a long time, and now in the 41st millennium, they're beginning to wake up. And God help the galaxy if they ever wake up completely en masse. One planet at a time, the Imperium might be able to keep a lid on it. If they had to fight too many Necrons at once, they'd be in serious, serious trouble. Because Necrons are, as I said, they can pretty much put themselves back together. And their most powerful unit is the Monolith, which is basically this giant floating fortress of doom thing. With massive, powerful weapons on it. And fighting back against the Necrons is very, very difficult, because as I said, you can't kill them permanently. They'll put themselves back together. One of the most powerful abilities of the Necron Lord is, or certainly in Dark Crusade and Soulstorm, You can upgrade the Necron Lord with various artifacts. My personal favourite combination is to ensure he has a teleporter, and then give him a device called a Resurrection Orb. Then just march your force right into the enemy base, let them do as much damage as they can while dying. Once they're dead, teleport the Necron Lord into the middle of them, smash the Resurrection Orb into the ground, and every single one of those Necrons gets back up and is ready to kill again. Yeah, this is why the Necrons are bloody terrifying and bloody difficult to fight. I mean, in Dark Crusade, for example, the only way you can defeat the Necrons permanently isn't by destroying them. It's by going into the centre of their home and leaving a very, very large explosive device behind and dropping the entire cavern on them. And that probably won't stop them permanently, but if the Imperium has any sense, they'll establish massive defences around that area and just blow the hell out of anything that someone just sticks its nose out. But the Imperium doesn't have sense most of the time. But Necron units are extremely powerful, so you've got your basic Necron warrior, who is damn near impossible to kill. Then you've got your more powerful units that are designed for taking out enemy armour, so carry more advanced versions of their Gauss rifles. Then you've got things like their primary melee units, which are called the Flayed Ones. The Flayed Ones do exactly what it sounds like. They wear the skin of their enemies, draped over them like a sort of grotesque imagination of flesh over their sort of metallic skeleton. And they've got basically Edward Scissorhands hands, which they used to just scythe their enemies apart, and again, Flayed Ones, pretty scary buggers. There's a reason why they induce a morale penalty on any enemy they're fighting, because they're bloody terrifying. And then you've got things like Pariahs, and Pariahs, again, it's kind of not sure what's going on with them sometimes, but Pariahs usually are people who've been taken by the Necrons and effectively turned into new Necrons. Yeah, they can do that. And again, that's bloody terrifying. So, the Necrons are a deeply, deeply creepy species, and if they ever awake en masse, the galaxy is buggered. Let's be honest, you really can put the phrase, the galaxy is buggered, and use that as a slogan for the whole of 40k. It goes in, Warhammer 40k, there is only war, the galaxy is buggered. Would sum it up pretty aptly. But it's also worth noting that the war with the original Necrotar and with the original Necrons is arguably what led to the rise of Chaos. Because up until that point, the war was pretty calm. The war between those two, between the Necrons and between the Old Ones, which, incidentally, the Old Ones did not survive. Or very, very, very few of them survived. Not enough for a viable population. So they are presumed extinct by the time you actually reach the main 40k timeline. And that war between them was what led to the birth of the first Gods of Chaos. And I don't know for certain what the order was. I think Nurgle's the oldest, followed by Khorne, followed by Tzeentch, followed by Slaanesh. In terms of, I know for a fact that Slaanesh is the youngest. And the other three, I don't know for certain, but based on based on what they are to all intents and purposes, I think Nurgle is the oldest. And then it would make sense for Khorne, then Tzeentch. But again, I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that, because I genuinely don't know. And the destruction of the Old Ones, it basically ended the only time that the galaxy was truly at peace. Yeah. And that was before the human race even gained full sentience. Sentience. So, yeah. So yes, that's basically the Necrons. Very old, very powerful, and absolutely worthy of pity. Because most Necrons, if they had enough sentience to actually realise what had happened to them, most of them would be screaming. Because, yes, they hated the Old Ones, but destroying all life, just to serve the Catan, just to harvest more souls. No, most of them would not have gone for that, and the amount they've lost themselves it barely bears thinking about. They are a race to be pitied. And frankly, that's just sad. To be fair, I actually kind of like the Necrons. They are kind of an interesting race. But, yeah, again, I do genuinely feel very sorry for them. But that's the way it is. And to be honest, you can feel very sorry for the Imperium. You can feel very sorry for the Eldar, because pretty much everybody's had terrible things happen to them as on a species-wide level in this universe. Because that's just the kind of universe it is. But, yeah. I think that's all I've got on the Necrons. So, next time, since I mentioned them a couple of times in this video, next time I'm going to talk about the Orcs. So, until then, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in future videos.